The first conversation I had with Matt about it, I just knew there was something radically different from anything we'd seen in Batman movies before.
I didn't want to do an origin tale because I felt that we had seen the origin tale done more than once. I wanted him to not have figured out how to be Batman yet. And I wanted to make him the world's greatest detective. And I thought, well, one place we haven't been is grounding it the way that Year One does. He's basically coping with things that happened to him as a child, and he's driven to try and make sense of his life.
Right from the beginning, there's a desperation to it. He's really working out this rage. All the fights seem very personal.
He doesn't have superpowers. What he has is a super heroic drive to try to make the world better.
When that light hits the sky, it's not just a call, it's a warning.
My God, is the Batman something special. Fun fact, one of the very first videos I ever made on this channel was a video talking about how fucking excited I was for Matt Reeves' The Batman. That was over a year ago. Ben Affleck never got his solo Batman movie, although I wanted to see it. I don't know if this movie will start a new DCEU or continue the old one from a multiverse perspective. I do not know. All I know is that Matt Reeves took on this project after Ben Affleck opted out, cast Robert Pattinson as Batman, decided to focus on a more detective kind of Batman who is not quite Batman yet. And here we are. The Batman is a movie that feels entirely different from any other Batman movie of recent memory. It is easily the best Batman movie since 2012's The Dark Knight Rises. It deserves your attention because it's fucking Batman, dude. But it commands your respect because it is a damn good film. One that dares to be the vision of a director and never compromised anything for this vision. Matt Reeves, thank you, sir.
And the only man who can stop them. I freeze. I'm Batman.
The last time we got a Batman film that got the character right, told a great story, and proved that a good old caped flick can be real cinema and not reduced to goofiness and cheesy effects was Batman Begins back in 2005. Batman Begins was the vision of a wonderful director by the name of Christopher Nolan. The entire Dark Knight trilogy was a Nolan trilogy. The Batman is a Matt Reeves movie, not a movie tampered with unjustly by studio executives. That being said, this will be a spoiler-filled review. A non-spoiler review is simple. The movie is excellent. I liked it. Go see it. This film is very well paced. As everyone knows, it's damn near 3 hours long, but it doesn't ever feel like that because I was invested in the story. I was anticipating this film for over 2 years. I was ready. I think when films have a lot of long takes and lingering shots, the film can venture into boring territory. Good pacing avoids this issue, but long lingering moments just have that effect inevitably. There aren't really that many of those shots in this film. The film feels like it's constantly moving. There's nothing to distract us from the main story here. And there is a lot to unpack with this movie. I mean, it is so unique. The gorgeous shots of Batman overlooking Gotham at dawn, Bruce and Selina on the rooftops, the shots of Batman fighting his way through the streets all put a smile on my face. Most of this film appropriately takes place at night, and it's always raining. Kind of reminded me of the Arkham games in that way, which is a good thing. The Batsuit feels thrown together and very much still in its first act, its genesis stage if you will. The cowl looks like hardened leather that formed over Pattinson's face over the last 2 years. The cape isn't yet the cape that Batman can use to glide throughout Gotham City with. It's merely a parachute at this point. Bruce might be a billionaire, but his gadgets don't feel like they're $1 million gadgets. The suit looks intimidating, but it doesn't look expensive. It looks like I could have gotten scrap metal together and put together a fucking Batsuit. And that's absolutely perfect for this version of Batman. Despite not seeming expensive, it probably is because it can withstand an entire clip from an AR. Bruce's Batcave isn't some state-of-the-art Batman HQ with a fancy setup. It's based in one of the tunnels or the subways underneath Wayne Manor, like the Gotham City and Todd Phillips' Joker. Gotham is a crime-ridden hellhole that's full of corruption, injustice, and scum. You're often thinking throughout the film, as is Batman, can Batman actually save this place? Can anyone? Maybe no one should. Or should they? Our Bruce Wayne in this film remains very stoic throughout, and only talks when necessary. However, we do get some really good narration from Bruce in the beginning and at the end of the film. We hear how Bruce views Gotham, how he views his crusade on crime. He silently observes and tries to hold in his pain while keeping grace under pressure. Bruce's narration keeps us in his mind. Is it worth protecting Gotham? It is, because someone has to, because Bruce needs to try. and make something good of his internal pain. The best thing about this film, Matt Reeves decided to focus on a very important yet often overlooked aspect of Batman, his detective skills, and he did it with flair. This film is like the movie Seven. It feels like we're watching the Zodiac Killer. It's a solve the puzzle kind of story, and I loved it. Why not? Yeah, we get to see Batman's brute aggressive strength, but we also get to see him flex his intelligence. Not to say that the previous Batmen were dummies, just that aside from a few isolated moments, Batman never quite lived up to the world's greatest detective nickname. I got Arkham vibes from the detective moments in this film, seeing the green question marks from the Riddler. We saw Bruce get angry with the Joker's mind games in The Dark Knight, and here we get to see the same thing. We get a scene where Batman prevented Selina from killing her father, and then where Gordon prevents Batman from almost killing one of the Riddler's goons. Seeing the "I almost crossed the criminal line" in this film was absolutely wonderful, and they did it so differently than The Dark Knight, other versions of Batman, that it really stood out. So everyone knows the basic plot of this story. The Riddler is a psychotic serial killer, and he's sending live streams of himself to the people of Gotham, and Batman teams up with Jim Gordon and they try to figure this out and find this guy. The twist here is that Bruce uncovers that his father and his idol, Thomas Wayne, had a reporter killed during his campaign for mayor many years ago. This reporter had some dirt on the Wayne family. This was covered up mainly since the Waynes are very wealthy. Even when Alfred admits to Bruce that his father never wanted the journalist to be killed, he hired Falcone to do this, and it sort of spun out of control. Thomas Wayne wanted to go to the cops and admit everything, but Falcone couldn't risk it, so they end up dying. And seeing Bruce discover this was so different because in the past incarnations of Batman, Thomas and Martha Wayne are kind of hailed as Gotham's wealthy elite who tried to use their money to help people. And in this film, while they did that, their story is a lot darker. And it really separated this film from other Batman films. You gotta remember, this really almost destroys Bruce because how can his family be corrupt, albeit not as corrupt as someone like Carmine Falcone, when Bruce's whole crusade began because he wanted to make a difference, to stop corruption? It's like a slap in the face. Alfred keeps this from Bruce, but like I said, he admits it to him in the end, and it stains their relationship, although it's restored after discussing it. I would have liked to see a bit more of Bruce's and Alfred's relationship, but maybe in the future, because Andy Serkis as Alfred was pretty good. It's just that he's not in the film much, and I kind of wanted to see more of him. I think Bruce internalizes the truth of his family and decides to keep fighting because he realizes that he can be sort of the redemption of the corruption and mistakes of his family. He can be better than them. He can be the incorruptible Batman. Everything really impressed me about the filmmaking of this movie. Matt Reeves used CGI so sparingly that I can't even tell you what shots were CGI and what weren't, to be honest, because everything looked so real in camera, and that's a fucking success. The music. Oh my god, Michael Giacchino's score, I mean, it's incredible. The way that he blended Ave Maria with his Batman theme was just unexpected. I did not think he was going to do that, but he did, and it works so well. You wouldn't think it would work for Batman, but it does. The music is very intense. It's loud, grand. It feels epic. It feels like something is coming. Like there's this entity, this animal-like entity stalking the criminals at night. Peter Craig and Matt Reeves both wrote the screenplay, and they did an incredible job. And everyone knows that this movie is 3 hours, but it really doesn't feel like it, and that's because of not only pacing but really good writing. The movie opens sort of abruptly. There's no slow build-up to a reveal like previous takes. The first 5 minutes of the film is essentially the first trailer we got back in the summer of 2020. We're dropped right into a random night of Batman's 2-year-long crusade. He beats up some criminals and moves on to the film's main antagonist, Edward Nashton, aka the Riddler. By doing this, we get no backstories. You know, it's just like a comic book. We're dropped right into the story. And so initially the film feels very narrative driven because it is. When you think about it, Batman is not yet a hardened warrior. He isn't fully Batman yet, and you could say the same thing about some of the criminals. Penguin isn't this big crime lord of Gotham yet. Riddler isn't one of Batman's most intellectually threatening foes. A lot of the characters in this film have not yet come into their own as the characters that we all know them to be. The film also manages to have some really good character development and sincere emotional depth underneath its comic book exterior. Let's talk about the performances. All of the performances were upper tier for me. Colin Farrell as the Penguin was great. He nailed the look. He was snarky like Cobblepot is, but he also has some unexpected comedic moments, which I didn't mind. He's more of a side villain compared to Falcone and the Riddler, but he is responsible for one of the best action sequences of the film. That awesome Batmobile chase where Batman tears up the rain-soaked streets of Gotham chasing Penguin. Zoe Kravitz as Selina Kyle was magnificent. She could fight and steal, as we all know, but she worked so well with Pattinson. The scene where she does recon for Bruce was so captivating. She also had the romantic dynamic with Bruce, and so her character was responsible for a lot of emotion emotion. She was perfect for this role, and she absolutely earns her spot next to some of the great Catwomen in the past, Pfeiffer, Hathaway, etc. I also love Jeffrey Wright as Jim Gordon. Gary Oldman still holds a very special place in my heart, but Wright came very close to being the quintessential James Gordon. He's trying really hard to fix Gotham, but he's only a detective. Gordon isn't yet a commissioner. He's really just a guy who trusts Batman and is apparently someone whom Batman seems to trust. Their dynamic was very much like that of two partners, and they're just trying to figure out these sick Riddler games together. They had a lot of scenes together. I think one of the best things that this film does is bringing Batman down to earth and having him work with Gordon constantly, not just having Bruce show up for a few minutes as Batman for some dialogue and then dipping out before Gordon can look back and find him. One of my favorite scenes of these two together was when Batman gets into a fight with some of the cops at GCPD, and so the cops want him arrested, but Jim secretly gives Batman a key and tells him how to secretly escape GCPD. It was a great comedic moment too. Obviously, Gordon is a non-corrupt cop who just wants what Batman wants, and so Gordon has a lot of depth to him too. His facial expressions convey lots of emotions, just like Zoe Kravitz. And on that note, body language is very apparent in this film. While there's a lot of well-written dialogue, there are a lot of quiet moments in the film to just understand what the characters want to say or are feeling without them actually saying anything. The chemistry between Batman and Selina and Batman and Gordon was there. Paul Dano as the Riddler was also very good. He wasn't in the film much, and he only really has one scene where he's fully unmasked and interacting with Batman, but when he went on about how he quote-unquote partnered up with Batman to try to accomplish something like Batman, it really infuriates Bruce. Bruce isn't trying to seek attention like the Riddler. He's trying to make a difference in the world, and he almost gets into Batman's head. It was a very, very good scene. Jim Carrey is amazing, and he was fun as Riddler back in the day, but the Riddler here is finally portrayed as he should be. Terrifying because he's smart and psychotic. He's a serial killer. That elaborate death trap scene was really unexpected, but I thought it was great. But of course, the most important performance of them all was Robert Pattinson as Bruce Wayne / Batman. I am so happy that he decided to steer away from big budget films and focus on indie projects. He blew me away in The Lighthouse. I am so happy that he was given the chance to play Batman because I think that he really does hit it out of the park. In the beginning, I was thinking this guy is really stoic, a little too stoic. Like, okay, back it down a little bit, buddy. He didn't say much. He spoke in a really low voice. His presence was often felt through body language, as I mentioned. He hides in the shadows. You hear his footsteps before you see him. This version of Batman is gritty, raw. He lives in a mansion with Gothic style architecture. Nothing fancy. He doesn't feel like he's a myth in this film. He feels very much like a man who can hold his own amongst violent criminals at night. He rides his motorcycle as Bruce and Batman through the streets when he has to be more stealthy. He has cool tech that he developed, like these eye contacts that can record everything that the user sees and analyze. Bruce is angry, but he's mostly distant to his enemies and his allies. He has no idea about the truth of his family history. He faces moments of powerlessness. I think Pattinson's portrayal was excellent. He absolutely nailed the Batman who wants to inspire fear amongst criminals and stop them at all costs. He is Batman for probably 90% of the film. Bruce Wayne is not really in this movie. When he is, he's often doing Batman things, and so we don't really get to see the difference between Bruce Wayne and Batman like we did with Bale, for example. But I think that was sort of the point, because ultimately Bruce Wayne is the mask to Batman. Batman is Bruce's true self. So having them be stoic, whether they're wearing the cowl or not, sort of made sense. There's a great scene in the beginning when Batman investigates the death of the mayor, and he sees the mayor's young son who found his dead father, and he just stares at him and begins to tear up. A lot of the time, Batman doesn't have to say anything, but in moments like this, we know exactly what Batman's feeling. We know exactly what he's thinking, and how we, the audience, are supposed to feel as a result. All in all, Pattinson had a lot to live up to, as did the filmmakers, but they all came through and they took a shot and decided to craft a Batman story that was completely unique. They didn't make Batman Begins again. They didn't create an origin story. They created the dark, gothic Gotham City like Tim Burton's Batman back in the 90s. This film is dark. Its Batman is brooding. Its criminals are brutal, but it's all done with conviction. The reason Pattinson can earn the mantle of Batman is because it's different. His take is different. This film feels different from Nolan's trilogy, from Adam West, from Keaton, Clooney, Kilmer. It feels grounded yet mysterious. It feels homemade, weird as it might sound. It's right to the point in some ways, never letting anything take our mind off the main story here. The film isn't afraid to let us enjoy the fact that this is a Batman movie where Batman is kicking ass, but also let us enjoy a good mystery. The film ends with Gotham City flooded, literally, not just from crime. Riddler's final attack blows up part of Gotham's infrastructure that keeps the water from flooding the city. Gotham is in disarray, but Batman ends up working with the National Guard to rescue trapped civilians, and it ends with Gotham under martial law in desperate need of repair. Batman has his work cut cut out for him. It sets up the foundation for future stories. Matt Reeves has made some great movies in the past, but up until this point, I think his Apes movie were my favorite, but this might now be my new favorite. I commend his efforts. He absolutely nailed it, and I hope he does it again because I believe a sequel and series spin-off is in the works. But all that being said, the real reason why Pattinson's take on Batman works for me is how they gave him such good character development. He wasn't just a punching machine. A great example of this is 3 times that he visits Penguin's Iceberg Lounge in the film. For information, these 3 visits coincide with the film's 3 acts. The first visit is in the first act when Batman just straight up walks to the door and brute forces his way through Penguin's guards. He's angry, he's forceful. The second time, during the second act, Bruce visits the lounge when he is at a low point as Bruce Wayne, not Batman. He's a little broken because he has just discovered the truth about his family and how his parents might have died. And the third visit is in the final act, where no one is at the door. Instead, Batman sneaks his way in. This really solidifies how much Bruce Wayne has grown in the film. In the final visit, he doesn't have to make his presence known. You don't always need to inflict your anger. Sometimes just getting in and getting what you need is more effective. This is exemplified with these 3 visits to the Iceberg Lounge. Another example of great character development for Batman is how he views the people he's fighting for and saving. In the beginning, Batman saves a man, but it seems like he's way less sympathetic to the man and more so trying to remain distant and simply apprehend and stopping criminals. In the end, when Riddler's bombs go off trapping people in the water, Bruce heroically dives into the fire, or in this case water, after a tough fight and helps the trapped people to safety, carrying victims to medics, holding the hands of those lives that you've just changed forever while empathizing and connecting with them. We get a scene like Bruce telling Alfred, "You're not my father," only to make Alfred shed a tear, and then have Bruce rushing home at the first sign of Alfred being in danger. Batman becomes a hero in this film. He becomes closer to the full hero of Batman, the way that Batman approaches his crusade, becoming closer and closer to understanding his purpose in what he's doing, while still skeptical of the results, but confident nonetheless. By the end, Bruce realizes that he must stand for hope. He cannot just be a brute. He needs to inspire the people, not just fight for them. So go see this fucking movie. It's really good. This is the only 10 out of 10 that I have given on my channel next to Squid Game. There were almost no flaws in the movie for me. It never got boring. It's a blockbuster that you want to catch. It's worth seeing in theaters. I can't wait to see it again. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, comment, have a great day, and I will see y'all next week. Take care, everybody. Stay safe.